Joining me now is best-selling author of groundbreaking works including The Strange Death of Europe, The Madness of Crowds, and his latest, The War on the West. Douglas Murray, let's start in the US. And apparently Kamala Harris grew up as a middle-class kid, and that's going to solve inflation.
When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid.
When we talk about bringing down prices and making life more affordable for people, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid.
And now her running mate, Tim Walz, is also going with that answer when asked about inflation.
Let's start with inflation. What do you tell people who wake up, frankly, each morning wondering, how am I going to get by financially?
Yeah, I tell them Kamala Harris and I know something about it, being middle-class folks.
Douglas, is this strategy going to work? The media seem to love it. The glowing coverage has not stopped for the pair, but is the electorate going to buy it?
It's very interesting. There are really only two reasons to do this line. The first is that both Harris and Walz feel that the American public don't know who they are. And that may be actually quite a good estimate of where they stand. Tim Walz has only come across the American public at large's radar in the last few weeks since he was named the running mate. And it's true that to a great extent, people don't really know Kamala Harris. And so it seems to me fairly obvious that their teams have said to them, you've got to establish yourself with the electorate and let them know who you are. It's quite interesting that the first and second most important jobs on earth are being competed for by people who feel that the public don't know who they are. But let me just go on to the second reason. The second reason you would say that is because you don't have a policy, because you have absolutely no idea of how to bring down inflation and to bring down the cost of living for average households in America. I said this to you recently, Rita. It's something that Kamala Harris has been particularly adept at throughout her political career, which is that you ask her a question about a big issue, and she tells you how big the issue is. And you say, what are you going to do about this very important thing? And she says, I'm going to explain to you why it's a very important thing and why people like me think it is a very important thing. Their fear about actually coming down to any nitty-gritty on policy is presumably because they don't have any policy, or the policy they would like to institute is one which they don't think the American electorate would like, and so they're going to spring it on them after the election when the electorate has graciously agreed to vote them into office.
And Harris has been telling us Bidenomics is working. She's been saying that for some time. So to now kind of switch it around and she's going to be the solution to the problems caused in part by Bidenomics, it wouldn't be an easy policy to sell. Now, we've also got at the moment this vitriolic, hyperbolic rhetoric against Donald Trump. It has not stopped, even really slowed down despite 2 assassination attempts in as many months. Indeed, they're blaming Donald Trump for the attempts on his life. We've been playing clips of that all week on this show. It's curious given the left has long argued that words can be violence, and they've sought to blame their ideological opponents for acts of politically motivated violence, even protests or riots. I'm old enough to remember last month, Douglas, when the likes of Alistair Campbell wanted you arrested for riots in Britain.
Look, I mean, it's an amazing thing, this. Every side in politics can get overheated. It goes without saying. Everyone, particularly in election season, lobs the biggest attacks they've got on their opponents. And this season is no different from any other to that extent. But the thing that is interesting and different is that we have now had 2 assassination attempts, not thwarted near the stage of assassination, but really serious plots, including a headshot to the president. And the Democrats and the Democrat media don't seem to have thought to tone it down a bit. That slightly amazes me because, I mean, when there is an attack on somebody of the political left, it should be axiomatic. It isn't always by any means, but it should be axiomatic that people on the right say there's absolutely no justification for this. Now, look, some people on the right don't do that, and they laugh about things, and they laugh things off, and so on. But in actual fact, I would like to think that if there had been 2 attempts on the life of Kamala Harris in the last few weeks, that you would not find what right-wing media there is in America saying, well, she brought it on herself. I mean, that's a quite amazing thing we've seen in recent days in relation to Donald Trump. The left-wing media in America actually saying, well, yeah, here's another assassination attempt on him, but maybe he shouldn't use such hurty words. And I find that astonishing. I also find it astonishing that people can't understand that if you keep saying that somebody is Hitler, it becomes pretty unviable to think that when somebody tries to kill the person you said was Hitler, that you have to say, well, I think he's Hitler, but I don't think people should kill him. I mean, you know, as you say, Rita, since we live in an era where people say that words have consequences, that words can be violence and much more, how about just sticking to the old idea that words are words and violence is violence? But there is a very important crossover point, which is incitement. And incitement laws are really pretty clear in the US. But if you start saying that your political opponent is going to take away every one of the rights of the electorate, that they're going to never go out of office, that they're going to be a dictator for life, that they're literally Hitler and more, then you probably have to take some responsibility for that. And, you know, this is a long way out from the election still. What will happen in the weeks to come? I dread to think.
Absolutely. You almost feel like another attempt on Donald Trump's life is a matter of when, not if. And it's just a terrible state of affairs. I want to ask you about what's happening in Australia, the UK. This war on free speech is intensifying. We have discussed the UK in the past, but here in Australia, the government is introducing Orwellian misinformation and disinformation legislation. You've written a piece for the New York Post on these proposed laws that the Albanese government says is all to for our safety. It's for our own good, Douglas. Is that how you see it?
Why didn't they just set up the Committee of the Public Safety like Robespierre and co.? It's wonderful when they couch it in this language. The idea, what I wrote was the idea that the Australian government, any more than the British government or the American government, should be the arbiter of what is true and what is false is absolutely ridiculous to my mind. And the important point is, it's not just that this particular Australian government can't do this. It's that no Australian government should do it. It's not that this particular Democrat or Labour administration in America or the UK shouldn't get into this train. It's that nobody could do it. There is nobody in the land, no committee of bureaucrats and apparatchiks you could set up that would be able to legitimately decide, Rita, what you and I should be able to read and know. And as I mentioned in that piece, I summoned up the memory of a real beauty. You remember Dan Andrews?
Oh, yes.
Right.
How could I forget?
I know, it haunts us all still. You remember in COVID when Dan Andrews decided to claim that an Australian having a pint outside in the street or anywhere else, if they were going to drink their pint of beer, should make sure that they keep their mask on and drink their pint through their mask. Now, that was only a couple of years ago. And Dan Andrews obviously has had his own problems since then, perhaps brought about by trying to drink all of his drinks through a mask, who knows. But the interesting thing is that passed for completely acceptable disinformation and misinformation by a very serious high-level official in Australia. The idea that other officials will decide what Australians should or should not be able to know after people like Dan Andrews perverted the nature of their office in that way is just laughable to me. We don't have to have long memories anymore to remember a recent occasion or set of occasions when people who thought they knew better than us told us things that turned out to be utter fibs.
Oh, Dan Andrews, the list with him is long, the former Victorian Premier. I remember when he scolded Victorians for watching sunsets at the beach. Apparently that was a danger to themselves and to their neighbours, watching sunsets. Yes. This madness is also happening in America and to a lesser extent, but they've got a constitution that protects free speech, but still California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill that would outlaw memes and obvious AI satire videos on elections. This ban was inspired by this amusing clip mocking the Democrats.
I had 4 years under the tutelage of the ultimate deep state puppet, a wonderful mentor, Joe Biden. Joe taught me rule number 1, carefully hide your total incompetence.
I mean, really, Douglas, are Californians so thick that they need to be protected from parody videos and funny memes?
I was delighted to see that one meme online today had Gavin Newsom dressed as a clown. I suppose Gavin Newsom would be confused as to whether or not we actually think he did appear on stage dressed as a clown. But I think I trust the voters of California and America a bit more than that. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? I mean, Gavin Newsom would have a particular strong impulse for trying to stop mocking memes and much more. That's because he's absolutely ripe for them. But once again, you get into this thing of, I wonder who would be just enough and wise enough to decide what mockery was and was not allowed. Maybe memes about Donald Trump would be allowed in this system. Maybe memes about J.D. Vance would be allowed in this system. But I suspect they would crack down double hard if the meme or the joke or the satire was about Gavin Newsom. That's why you just can't give censorship tools to people like this. They would not be able to resist using them to their own advantage. And so you know, there is definitely a problem in the information age of false information being passed around. But my solution to that is that we, the public, have to be much wiser to that. And my experience is that most young people coming up are actually wiser to that. We have to get wiser to that, because the alternative is some set of bureaucrats in Australia or America or somewhere else deciding what you and I are allowed to laugh about and what we're allowed to find funny. And I, at any rate, wouldn't want to live in such a system.
No, and before you go, I have to get your thoughts on Hezbollah's humiliation. It appears to be some of Mossad's most creative work, and predictably it's been attacked by many so-called progressives in the West who are calling the pager plot an act of terrorism. How do you see this? I would have thought it was a very targeted attack to try to minimise casualties amongst non-combatants.
Yeah, I mean, whoever did it, and we should add, I mean, it obviously looks like it was the Israelis, but I mean, Hezbollah have quite a lot of enemies, not least in the region. They've managed to destroy Lebanon since the 1980s, a once really thriving country. That Lebanon has just suffered from this immiseration and violence since, particularly since Hezbollah has had the grip it now has. So they have a lot of enemies, but it looks like it was probably Israel that did it. And the people who claim that this is terrorism, I mean, I would just say, you know, the definition of terrorism is the deliberate targeting of innocent civilians. This is exactly the opposite of that. This is the deliberate targeting of Hezbollah terrorists in the most targeted, precise, and somewhat personal way imaginable. This, you know, the people who say that, you know, this is indiscriminate seem not to have noticed that if you have a Hezbollah pager device or a Hezbollah walkie-talkie on you, the chances are you may well be a member of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is a designated terrorist organization, and therefore you're just not innocent. So I suppose Hezbollah will try to spin this with their useful idiots in the West, and these people are useful idiots at this point, or just enemies of the West. Because let's be frank about it. If you're the sort of person, as the people sort of howling about this on social media and on some of the newspapers in the last couple of days have been doing, if you're one of those people howling about this, you can guarantee they're the same people who are howling about any collateral injuries in any targeted strike, for instance, in Gaza or southern Lebanon in the last year or in recent years. You can be guaranteed of that. And now they claim you also shouldn't do the most precise thing of all, which is making the pager devices of Hezbollah operatives explode. These guys should just come out and say it, which is they want Israel to be destroyed. They want Hezbollah and Hamas to win. They're on the side of the jihadists. Why don't these people have the guts to come out and say it? Because Israel can do nothing from including the most targeted operation without these people saying that Israel shouldn't have done it. These people who are making these complaints in the last few days are people who want Israel to lose. That's fine. That's their view. I want Israel to win. These people want Hezbollah to thrive. I don't. I want to see them gone. I want to see them stop making misery in Israel and making misery in Lebanon. But, there it is. It's a very clear divide. And just remember, of course, the munitions that Hezbollah uses are far from precise. And when they throw hundreds and hundreds of rockets, unguided missiles, and others into Israeli territory, it has consequences like killing a dozen Israeli Druze children whilst they're playing football. So I take the Israeli targeted strikes on actual Hezbollah terrorists over Hezbollah killing innocent children playing football any day. And if other people can't see that distinction, they probably can't see anything, Rita.
Douglas Murray, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Pleasure as always.